The torches crackle low against the sandstone walls, filling the room with a thick amber glow. The air is hot, heavy, and sweet, too sweet, the kind of sweetness that makes your stomach twist instead of comfort you. It is 2200 BC, deep beneath the desert, in chambers the public will never know exist. You are a young palace guard, summoned at midnight and given only 2 instructions. Bring honey. Tell no one. Now you stand in a half circle with 6 other men, all pretending not to see the fear trembling in each other's shoulders. Before you, a boy no older than 12 kneels naked on a raised stone slab. His body glistens as servants paint him with honey from head to toe, layer after layer, until he shines like a golden statue offered to some unholy altar. He does not shiver. He does not speak. He has been trained out of those instincts, but his eyes are alive, wide, trapped, screaming. Clay jars line the walls, sealed, shaking, alive. The sound inside them is a living storm, wings beating against clay, claws scraping for release. 3 species you recognize from whispered rumors: starved scarab beetles, fire ants from Nubia, and temple wasps bred for rage. But in the corner, there is a 4th jar, large, veiled, kept apart from the others like something sacred or forbidden. The chamber doors open and silence falls. The Pharaoh enters, Pepi II, the ruler of Egypt. His spine bends with age, his face cracked with a century of living, his eyes clouded from time, but his hunger is sharp and awake. 94 years on the throne have turned him into something more myth than man. He walks slowly, every step careful, every breath sipped like it must be rationed, yet everything in the room bends toward him, as if gravity itself obeys his throne. The boy on the platform is nothing. The guards are nothing. Even the priests shrink into shadow. This is not justice or religion. This is appetite wearing gold. With a flick of his fingers, a gesture so small it feels obscene, the first jar is opened. The beetles rush out like spilled night. Then the ants, a red river of fire. Then the wasps, wings screaming louder than the boy's voice ever will. The child tries to stay silent, tries to obey his training, but agony breaks discipline quickly. The first sound he makes is not a scream. It is a gasp, small and startled. Like a bird struck mid-flight, Pepi leans forward. He is not horrified, he is fascinated. You realize, with a sickness that makes your knees weak, that this is not a punishment. It is a performance. The chamber was built for listening. The walls are angled to throw the screams back toward the throne. The ritual will last 3 hours, the boy will live, and when he heals, it will happen again. You know now why the orders were secret. You know why honey must be delivered in such impossible quantities. You know why no one speaks of what happens beneath the palace, and you understand too late why some people call Pepi not a king, not even a god, but a hunger-wearing human skin. Because tonight you are not guarding a pharaoh, you are witnessing a system, a machinery of suffering, and it has only just begun. Long before the honey chambers, before the insects and the sealed halls beneath the palace, there was a frightened little boy, a 4th son who was never meant to rule anything. The year is 2278 BC, and Egypt is already cracking beneath quiet conspiracies. Pepi's father, Pepi I, dies in what officials publicly call a scorpion sting, but palace guards whisper a different truth, a sting that left a wound the exact width of a bronze dagger, clean and deliberate. A week later, Pepi's older brother, the crown prince, dies of river fever while stationed deep in the desert. Nowhere near a river, a child barely old enough to read is now pharaoh, not because destiny chose him, but because someone needed a boy young enough to shape. He is 6 years old when his mind begins to split. The coronation ritual was never meant for a child so young, but Egypt had laws older than mercy. At dawn, the priests strip him naked before 3,000 watching nobles. He is small, shivering, confused. A sacred white bull, raised for years, is led forward and its throat is cut. The blood doesn't pour, it erupts. The priests lift Pepi by his thin arms and plunge him into the basin of steaming blood. Children normally scream or choke or panic until they're pulled back gasping for air. Pepi doesn't. He stays under longer than anyone expects. When he rises crimson and dripping, he laughs, not in hysteria, but in delight. He licks the blood from his fingers like a child tasting honey for the first time. The high priest later writes in a private journal that in 40 years of service, nothing had ever frightened him more than the smile on that child's face. But the ritual is not over. A prisoner is dragged forward, trembling, kneeling. A ceremonial bronze blade is placed into Pepi's hands. It's far too heavy for him. The priests expect hesitation or clumsy failure. They expect fear. They do not expect curiosity. Pepi swings, misses, falls forward into the blood. The nobles gasp. This is the moment when most children break. Instead, Pepi stands up calmly and examines the blade the way another boy might study a new toy. He adjusts his grip, swings again. This time he hits, not cleanly, not skillfully, but with the persistence of a child discovering something fascinating. It takes 11 blows to separate the head. Pepi does not stop until the spine gives way. He lifts the head by the hair, looks into its dead eyes and whispers to it. When a priest asks what he said, the boy answers in a voice as gentle as quiet rain, "I wanted to know what death tastes like." And then, the moment that seals Egypt's fate, it tastes like power. That was the first fracture, the first rewiring, the first hint of the creature he would become. And then comes the final act of coronation, the most unspoken, erased from official records. Each of his father's wives, the secondary queens, must die to accompany the old Pharaoh into the afterlife. Tradition says poison, quick, ritual, dignified, but the 6-year-old refuses poison. He wants to watch. He orders them strangled slowly, pausing between each phase so he can observe the moment when terror becomes surrender. 4 hours later, the hall is still and silent, except for the breathing of a boy whose feet cannot reach the floor of his throne, but whose eyes already belong to something ancient and terrible. Before the day ends, 41 half-siblings are brought before him. Potential rivals. Boys are strangled like their mothers. The girls are forced to choose servitude or death, while their mothers' bodies still lie cooling beside them. 6 choose to live, not because they want life, but because they cannot yet imagine the shape of his darkness. In one day, a quiet child becomes a god. In one day, a god becomes something colder than fear. In one day, Egypt creates the mind that will one day build chambers beneath its own palace. The monster is not born here, but this is the day he begins to enjoy becoming one. A normal child would have been mentored, guided, softened by family and tutors. Pepi had none of that. Everyone around him treated him as divine, which meant no one dared correct him. No one dared refuse him. No one dared remind him he was still a child and without limits. Curiosity became dissection. By age 7, the surviving palace girls notice something horrifying. Pepi does not watch suffering for cruelty. He watches it the way a scholar studies astronomy, taking mental notes, comparing results, refining technique. By age 8, he has discovered his favorite moment, not death, but the instant before it, the silence when the mind breaks before the body stops. He names it the divine silence. The priests are disturbed, but none dare challenge the child god who is beginning to treat pain as theology. He starts collecting poisons like another boy might collect toys. Lotus, mandrake, monkshood, serpent sap, different herbs, different venoms. He orders the palace physicians to test combinations on condemned servants, not to kill them, to paralyze them. He wants them conscious but helpless. He writes notes in childish handwriting on rolls of papyrus. This one screams inside but cannot move. The royal tutors are forced to help him categorize reactions, as if he were cataloging birds or minerals. Pain is no longer punishment. Pain is data by age 9. Pepi makes a discovery that shapes everything that follows. Not all suffering is the same. He begins to classify pain into flavors: burning, piercing, suffocating, crushing, dissolving, fevered, drawn out. Insect-born. What other ruler builds a taxonomy of agony before his 10th birthday? At age 10, the government witnesses his disconnection from anything human. During morning court, a cat catches a bird in the throne room. Grain shortages, border raiders, foreign tribute, all wait while Pepi watches the cat toy with the dying bird. A noble suggests continuing state business. Pepi has him beaten unconscious, not because he challenged authority, but because he interrupted the process of suffering. When the bird finally dies, Pepi rewards the cat with royal offerings and declares any slow-killing animal sacred. He is not merely entertained by death. He is studying it as a form of truth. At age 11, he writes the infamous dwarf letter, still preserved in fragments. He threatens an entire company of soldiers with the murder of their children if a pygmy dancer arrives injured. Historians often quote the threat, but the final line, the postscript often omitted, is where the real revelation lies. He also demands a second child of the same size for comparison of endurance. He does not want the dwarf to dance. He wants to measure his suffering. He is no longer merely observing pain. He is conducting experiments on it. By age 12, the palace servants' children are brought to him for blessings. They enter his private chamber healthy. They leave altered, limping, trembling, or not at all. These chambers are not yet the honey rooms, not yet the beetle pits, not yet industrialized, but everything is there in seed form: control, curiosity, ritualized cruelty, and the desire to return to a specific moment of power and silence. The honey will come later. The insects will come later. The system will come later. But the idea that suffering is a resource is already fully formed. Pepi is no longer a traumatized child. He is now a practitioner, a student of pain. And soon, Egypt will become his laboratory. By adolescence, Pepi has exhausted what the palace can supply quietly. Palace servants' children disappear. Stable boys vanish. Page boys assigned to carry his sandals simply never return from private summons. At first, whispers try to stay whispers. Then a mistake is made. The first boy Egypt cannot hide. When Pepi is 24, a 13-year-old noble's son is invited to join the palace musicians, a prestigious honor, something that should have brought status to his family for generations. 3 days later, his body is returned, or what is left of it. His injuries are not the wounds of execution or accident or illness. They are the marks of sustained experimentation. The embalmer himself refuses the body, something unheard of in Egyptian culture, claiming the boy's car. The life force is broken beyond its path to the afterlife. That message is a direct accusation. The noble family demands justice. They are connected, wealthy, untouchable, or so they believe. Pepi's genius is not cruelty, it is weaponized sanctity. Pepi does not deny what happened. He elevates it. He declares the boy divinely transformed through holy suffering. He reframes torture as religious privilege. Then he invites the grieving family to the palace to receive sacred recompense. They are never seen again. Their estate is absorbed into the treasury. Their servants vanish. Their family records abruptly end. Egypt learns the lesson. Justice is not merely unreachable. Even the attempt will make you disappear. The birth of the machine. This is the moment Pepi realizes something crucial. He doesn't need secrecy. He needs infrastructure. So he creates a new royal office, the overseer of royal entertainments. It sounds ceremonial, a harmless courtly title. In reality, it is procurement, a bureaucracy of suffering. The first overseer, a man named Keti, is chosen not for loyalty or intelligence, but for a profound absence of conscience. Within months, Keti builds a network that will one day rival the military in scale. Village scouts to identify suitable boys, transport agents to move them discreetly, physicians to keep them alive for reuse, record keepers to track durability. handlers to dispose of remains, collectors who monitor voices, height, age, and scream quality. The victims are no longer individuals. They are inventory. Boys become resources. Pain becomes policy. Hunger becomes government. Egypt is not yet dying, but its soul is already gone. The first honey chamber has not been built yet, but the blueprint is forming. The court stops objecting. The priests stop warning. The nobles stop asking questions, not because they approve, but because survival requires silence, and silence is the first ingredient in atrocity. By the time Pepi reaches middle age, pain is no longer something he inflicts, it is something he curates. He has developed tastes the way a wine collector develops a palate. But personal preference is no longer enough. He wants spectacle. He wants theater, and Egypt will be forced to build it for him. The moment of inspiration. One day, Pepi watches warehouse laborers spill honey near a storage hall. A young worker slips, falls into the spill, and within seconds becomes covered in biting insects swarming from a nearby pile of grain. Most witnesses rush forward to drag the boy away. Pepi does not move. He freezes, not with disgust, not with concern, but with revelation. This is suffering delivered by nature. No blade, no rope, no human hand. Pain that looks like divine punishment. A ritual is born in his mind before the boy is even rescued. Within months, he orders the first chamber built beneath the palace. A simple room at first, sealed with bitumen to mute screams. It is primitive, limited, experimental. But Pepi watches each session with the same absorption he once reserved for his coronation bird. It is not enough. So the chamber expands, then multiplies. One room becomes 3. 3 become 7. 7 become 9. Each chamber with a different purpose. Preparation hall, cleansing and ritual shaving. Honey chamber, the main torture platform. Beetle pit, submersion in starving scarabs, ant corridor. Exposure to venom swarms, serpent den, for victims who last too long. Water room, immersion in unknown organisms. Fire hall, controlled burning for contrast. Recovery bay, physicians keep them alive. Disposal crypt, silence and ash, and above them all, the observation platform, where Pepi watches in mirrored stillness. He does not scream. He does not gloat. He does not chant or perform theatrics. He studies, like a scientist refining a formula. The honey turns from substance to system. Raw honey works, but not violently enough. So Pepi orders experimentation taught through trial on living children. The torturers discover the perfect mixture, ingredient, purpose, honey base. Attractant, saliva amplifies, scent, signature, tears adds. Salt to trigger certain species, blood draws. Carnivorous insects, fear pheromones, the catalyst, and here is the most hideous detail. They learn that terror itself is an ingredient. The human body, under extreme fear, releases compounds through sweat that attract predatory insects faster than any bait. Which means the more frightened the child, the more savage the swarm. Fear becomes part of the recipe. Suffering becomes choreography. No session is random. It is timed, measured, adjusted. More honey on the feet. Delay the wasps. Let swelling build first. Increase. And density on the left side. Pause to prolong. Consciousness. Victims are not killed. They are managed, prolonged, preserved, reused. He is no longer simulating death. He is studying thresholds. By age 52, Pepi is no longer simply a king with perversions. He is the architect of an institution. Pain is no longer his pastime. It is Egypt's industry, and the nation is beginning to warp around this appetite, economically, religiously, politically, though it will not recognize the full cost until it is far too late. At first, the chambers consumed victims. Then they consumed resources. Now they begin consuming Egypt itself. Honey replaces grain. The honey chambers require unimaginable quantities, not small jars for ritual, but vats, rivers, whole harvests. Fields that once grew grain for the people are converted to flower cultivation for bees. This shift begins quietly. But within 20 years, Egypt is producing more honey than food. The Nile floods start failing during this same period, the worst possible timing. Children starve in the villages, while thousands of jars of honey vanish into the palace basements. The people know where it goes. They dare not say. The procurement network becomes a state institution. The overseer of royal entertainments now controls 4 regional directors, 40, provincial coordinators, 200, village scouts plus transport handlers, healers, corpse minders, insect farmers, potters, canal builders, record keepers. Nearly 1,000 people are employed solely for the capture, preparation, and recycling of children. This is no longer twisted indulgence. It is administration. The quotas arrive. Each province must now supply a fixed number of boys. The selection criteria have become grotesquely precise. Height, within 2 fingers of measurement. Weight, half a dibon accuracy. Skin tone, matched to painted tiles. Voice, tested for pitch because Pepi's aged ears prefer higher screams. Children become units of measurement. Entire regions try to resist villages' fake plagues. Fathers scar their sons with hot iron to make them undesirable. Some break their boys' legs so they will be rejected. Sometimes it works. More often, Pepi takes them anyway, the deformity becoming a new form of interest. Other villages tell lies. Floods swept them away. Desert raiders stole them. A god cursed our boys with ugliness. These governors are executed for withholding tribute. Their families erased. A society without children. Some districts lose 70% of all male children in 1 generation. Not war, not disease, harvesting. In archaeology, this shows up as a demographic anomaly, but ancient Egyptians would have known the truth in their bones. Egypt was bleeding from its cradle. Foreign nations recoil, trade routes begin to close. Zuma calls Egypt unclean. Canaanites forbid Egyptian merchants from entering their temples. Nubia builds fortifications not for war, but to hide children. One Sumerian clay tablet describes Egypt as the land where children enter palaces and do not return. Even raiders, the fearless sea peoples, avoid Egyptian ports, calling them cursed. Meanwhile, inside Memphis, Pepi does not notice collapse, or rather, he does not care. The economy is dying. The priesthood is withdrawing. The army is evaporating, but as long as the chambers operate, Pharaoh believes Egypt still functions. He does not rule anymore. He feeds, and the country becomes the carcass he is slowly eating alive from the inside. By Pepi's late 80s, Egypt is barely holding together. The irrigation canals rot. The priesthood mutters in half-coded prayers. The army has thinned into a skeleton guard, but Pepi has not slowed. His body is dying. His appetite is not. The chambers multiply. 9 chambers become 27. Sessions run in parallel, not one boy at a time, but many. The screams overlap into a constant wail that even thick walls cannot drown. Some servants later describe the palace as sounding like a slaughterhouse of souls. Pepi is now too weak to stand, so guards carry him from room to room on a golden litter, like a spectator moving between exhibits at a gallery, pausing only when a certain shriek interests him. The supply collapses. The machine begins to starve. Entire provinces have been emptied of boys. Villages hide their children in caves and deserts. Some families kill their own sons so Pepi cannot have them, so the palace switches tactics. No more secrecy, no more selection. Military seizure begins. Soldiers raid villages at sunrise, dragging away every boy who can walk but cannot yet grow a beard. Fathers who resist are killed in the street. Bodies left where they fall as a warning. The story of the 801 village chooses collective death rather than surrender its children. When scouts arrive, they find 800 corpses, entire families who drank poison together. Pepi is enraged, not by the loss of life, but by the loss of suffering. He has the corpses covered in honey and displayed in the palace courtyard, furious that they denied him living entertainment. Even dead children are turned into spectacle. The last grand performance. In Pepi's 96th year, witnesses describe one final session too horrific for even Egyptian scribes to record. Greek historians centuries later mention it only in veiled reference. 40. Boys' insects bred to monstrous proportions, substances not meant for human flesh torture from sunset. Until dawn, no survivors. The chamber attendants who saw it fled Egypt the next day, the next 3 days. Pepi barely sleeps, not because of sickness, but because he is restless, agitated, dissatisfied. Decades of extremes have numbed him. He feels nothing unless pain is escalating. He needs more. There is nothing left to give. The death of the devourer on the morning of the 4th day. Pepi II is found dead in his bed, curled around a piece of honeycomb, as if clinging to the last taste of what defined his life. His mouth is frozen in a half-open expression witnesses later describe as starved longing. He does not die punished. He does not die exposed. He does not die haunted. He dies content, the same way he lived, consuming sweetness, never consequences. But the moment he dies, Egypt detonates. The palace erupts, not in mourning but in frenzy. Rooms are sealed, records burned, bodies hidden. Chambers collapsed. Everything is buried before history can see it, because what comes next is not funeral. It is erasure. Pepi's body is not yet cold when the panic begins. The palace does not prepare for burial. It prepares for silence. The frantic cover-up for 3 days, Memphis becomes a furnace. Documents are not ceremonially archived. They are thrown into fire by the armful. Papyrus rolls that took decades to write vanish in a night. Stone inscriptions are hammered away. Walls are broken just to remove a single name. Scribes work backwards, unhistering their own king, all to erase the scale of what Egypt allowed. The children left behind, the living victims, and the ones kept in holding chambers to be reused have become a problem. Releasing them would be confession. Showing them would be evidence. So they are sealed inside. Not murdered, not executed, walled in and abandoned to starve in. Darkness. Some of those boys were still breathing when the last stones fell. Archaeologists have never been allowed to reopen those passages, and they never will. The mummy sabotage Egypt normally preserves its kings more carefully than its gods. But Pepi's embalming is not protection. It is vengeance disguised as ritual. His organs are improperly treated, desiccants chosen to corrode. Not preserve his body is placed backwards, and his cavity is filled with live insects to consume him from within. His pyramid is built with intentional structural weakness so that in time it will collapse upon him. It does. His own tomb kills him again. The kingdom collapses with him. Without boys, there are no farmers. Without farmers, there are no harvests. Without harvests, there is no civilization. The old kingdom fractures in less than a year. Regional warlords rise. The central state dissolves. The priesthood abandons Memphis. Trade dies permanently. Egypt, being the greatest power of its world, falls not to an enemy, not to a god, not to a storm, but to scarcity of children. It was not the chambers that ended Egypt. It was the absence of the people who might have grown up to rebuild it. The Pharaoh destroyed his kingdom by consuming its future. The forgotten victor's Pepi is still in the records. His victims are not. No names, no graves. No stories, only demographic shadows, bone fragments, and the mathematical outline of absence. And yet, they won. Because the most powerful empire on earth died from their disappearance. 100 armies could not have broken Egypt so completely, but 50,000 missing boys did. The message across 200 years, we remember Pepi II as a name, but the world we live in today, the borders of nations, the timeline of kingdoms, the rise of successor states, exists partly because a civilization collapsed under the weight of one man's unchecked appetite. The echo of those children is not myth. It is demographic physics. A kingdom is never conquered faster than when it devours its own sons.